Whether it's cars, comics, video games, or violins, there's a little geek in all of us. It's time to give your geek a voice. It's time for Geek Therapy. Here's your host, Johnny Hamburger.
Back here live at the Waterfront Village with my friend, the zombie, Jonathan. You're looking good. Jonathan just got an awesome face paint job. What do you think?
I like turtles.
All right. You're great zombie. And good times here at the Waterfront Village. Open for the next 11 days.
I do like turtles. Me too, Jonathan. Stay strong, brother. Stay strong. Don't ever forget that kid. I like turtles. The thing is, growing up, I did like turtles, and we actually had, me and my brothers had turtles as pets. We had a couple of box turtles. We probably had, I don't know, a handful through the years. Hold on, let me reach my coffee. That was in the 90s. And I believe since then, at least here in Texas and probably lots of other states, owning box turtles is illegal. Not for any sort of environmental protection reason, but for health reasons, I guess. Box turtles carry salmonella or something like that. That's what I was told. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, that's other than cats, I would say, in a dog, Goldie. Other than that, favorite pet that I've ever had would be box turtles. What are your favorite pets? Like, what did you grow up with? I know everybody had hamsters and gerbils, including me. I had hamsters and gerbils, and they were fun and all. Got bit a lot, and man, I don't know whoever is out there listening that's ever been bit by a gerbil or a hamster. Those things hurt and they draw blood. Those teeth, those incisors that they have. And if you're looking at the video on YouTube, I'm making my fingers the incisors. That's the beauty of video. See my hand motions? But those teeth, they dug in deep and they didn't let go. Because I remember one time I put my gerbil into a clothes basket, a laundry basket. That's the term I'm looking for. I put the gerbil in a laundry basket, and you know laundry baskets have those patterns cut into it, you know, of various designs, but there's basically a bunch of holes cut into the container, into the laundry basket, into the plastic laundry basket. So these little holes, you know, they were like just big enough to put your big toe through. And if you're thinking of the girth of a gerbil or a hamster, the girth of a gerbil or a hamster is about one human big toe. If you think about it, especially a gerbil. Gerbils are usually a little bit smaller. So anyways, I put our gerbil, and gerbils are the things that have the long tails. I don't know if you can pick them up by the tail. I believe you can. We did kind of base the tail, pick them up. They didn't seem to mind it. Maybe I'm horrible because I didn't know what I was doing. But anyways, gerbils have the tails, and I put one in the laundry basket, and it started to go through one of those cutouts in the side of the laundry basket, and it got stuck. It got halfway through, and it was, I don't know how it got stuck, but it got stuck, and it was trying to, you know, push through it and then like pull itself out of it, but it couldn't do it. So I reached down on the outside of the basket to, you know, kind of grab the gerbil and like either just help it out, either push it back through or pull it out. But what had happened was the gerbil bit me, and it bit me hard. And so my knee-jerk reaction to getting bit was to yank my hand away. So when I yanked my hand away, I pulled the hamster or the gerbil through the laundry basket little cutout, and I flung him across the room, clear across the room. And that little gerbil bounced off the wall and down onto the ground and started scurrying around. And so we had a fun game of catch the gerbil and put it back in the cage. Now that sounds really cruel, I know. But let's think about the physics of it. That gerbil was fine. That gerbil flew across the room, hit the wall, bounced onto the carpet, and was running around. That gerbil was fine, uninjured. Nothing wrong with that gerbil. I was bleeding profusely. I was the one who was actually injured. I was the one who actually came out of that debacle with an injury. But the gerbil's fine. And let's think about the physics of it. The gerbil weighs how many grams does a gerbil weigh? So the momentum that it held, aka the extra weight of that gerbil, the velocity of the gerbil, am I thinking of the right term? Maybe I'm blanking out. It's late. I haven't had enough coffee. But the weight of that gerbil's mass times the speed hitting that wall was not that great. If I had hit the wall at the same velocity, I would have splattered into just a soup, into a warm soup. That's what would happen to my body. But a gerbil, since it doesn't carry much mass, it hit the wall and bounced off unscathed. You could probably drop a gerbil off the roof onto concrete and it would probably be fine. Don't do that, for the love of God. Do not drop your small animals from dizzying heights to test the survivability of drops for an animal that weighs a few grams. I will not be held responsible for your tomfoolery and your cruelty. And if I ever hear about someone doing that, I will do my best to see that you get put in prison for animal cruelty. Don't do that to your animal. But it's the same principle in cats. That's the reason why cats can fall several stories onto concrete and be just fine. Just run away just fine. Most cats. My girlfriend's cat fell about a foot to the ground and broke his leg. But that's because he is severely morbidly obese. He weighs like 18 pounds now. He's a fat cat and he's special. So when he fell 1 foot, he broke his leg, and his leg, like we've covered in various shows, is now healed kind of wonky. Kind of aiming outside, off to the right a little bit, or off to the left a little bit. It's his left foot. His right foot stands straight, and it points 90 degrees straight forward towards his front paw. The left foot has healed just a few degrees off. But guess what? His quality of life is unchanged. All I wanted to talk about this segment was our favorite pets growing up. Not necessarily cats, not necessarily dogs, because those are the most popular pets, but maybe as geeks, we had a weird pet that was our favorite. Maybe an iguana or a lizard or a snake. Let's think of something that's not a reptile. Maybe you had a guinea pig. Guinea pigs are kind of popular, but not like cat and dog popular. Maybe a fish. Maybe you had a betta fish that was your favorite non-cat or dog animal that you had growing up. So mine was box turtles, and even if it's illegal, I kind of want to get another box turtle. Box turtles were fun. They weren't very fast, obviously, but that just meant you could take them out in the yard and they could scurry around the lawn and you wouldn't have to worry about them getting too far. Another thing you could do with box turtles is you could get a helium balloon and tape the balloon string to the turtle and have the balloon hanging, a couple feet above it so you could know where it is in the yard at any given moment, see where it is. And the way we used to keep our box turtles was we bought a kiddie pool, just a regular kiddie pool that you'd fill with water and put your kids in and they splash around and have a good time. But they made a good aquarium. I'm having a really hard time remembering words tonight. I do not know why. But terrarium, that's the word. A kiddie pool makes a very good terrarium for a box turtle because the sides of them are about, a foot high, 10 inches high, so the turtle can't climb over it. So what you do is you put the wood chips, the cedar chips around as the bedding, the base of the turtle's living arrangement. And we had Folgers coffee cans, the big Folgers cans, and fake logs because turtles like to crawl under things and hide and feel a sense of security. So we had the water in there, and turtles love to eat lettuce and carrots and different vegetables and fruits. And that's the other thing. Box turtles were super, super easy to take care of. They didn't need special food or any sort of special arrangement. They could live in basically anything. I mean, we used wood chips to soak up the urine and all that kind of stuff. But as far as food and diet, you didn't have to make any special sort of trips to the pet store or supermarket for food just for your turtles, just for your box turtles at least, because you could give them your leftover salad, maybe not with all the dressing and stuff on it, of course, but salad, like I said, tomatoes, carrots, just any sort of vegetable without any dressing. The turtle was so happy, would just chomp away at that. Yeah. So again, go to YouTube, Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube to see me miming how a box turtle eats. It is a titillating video. Edge of the seat stuff, folks. I'm Johnny Hamburger, your mental curator for the evening. You are listening to Geek Therapy Radio. We've been talking about our favorite pets, our favorite non-conventional pets growing up. Be sure to go to Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook and like the page, Geek Therapy Radio on Instagram, and geektherapyradio.com. I don't pimp that enough, but geektherapyradio.com. And that basically covers all the social media bases. But it's really fun to go to YouTube and actually watch what I'm doing here behind the mic. So you can laugh at me. Not with me. I'm not naive. I know you're laughing at me. But stick around. There's more Geek Therapy Radio to come. We're going to talk about some actual tech stuff, some actual geek things. A lot of stuff's going on this week. I'm very happy that my friends and family are safe after Harvey. So I'll touch on that for just a second right now. Very glad my friends and family are safe. I know a lot of us lost a lot of belongings, but things can be replaced. It's sad if we lost any heirlooms or photo albums, of course, but we are still here. We are still alive and kicking, so I'm very thankful for that. Stick around. More Geek Therapy Radio to come. I'm Johnny Hamburger, and I'll be with you for the next, 45 minutes or so. So keep listening right here, Geek Therapy Radio.
What did you think about the ride?
It was great. And apparently, I've never been on live television before, but apparently sometimes I don't watch the news because I'm a kid, and apparently Grandpa just gives me a remote after we watch the Powerball.
It's the Powerball.
Tell me about the ride. What did you think about the ride?
Well, it was great.
Why?
Because apparently you're spinning around, and apparently every time you get dizzy,
Yeah?
that's all you do is get dizzy.
Is it fun?
Yeah. And I've never ever been on live television. I never ever be on live television.
Are you excited?
Yeah, and apparently I only went down the super slide. When I went down the one, I was scared half to death. I just freak out.
Okay.
What I need his name. Hi, honey. Hold on. Yep. Hold on. I'm just gonna ask him. What's his name? Noah. What's your last name?
Deck Ritter.
How do you spell his last name?
Ritter, R-I-T-T-E-R.
Okay. Where are you guys from? Wilkes-Barre. All right, buddy.
All right. Apparently, this is Geek Therapy, and apparently, I'm Johnny Hamburger, your mental curator for this evening, and I hope I don't say apparently a million times. I don't know why I'm on this kick of old viral videos. Did you know, the last segment, that I like turtles kid, that thing went viral 10 years ago. 10 years ago. That's how old that video is. These old viral videos keep popping up in my brain. And so I'm playing them for you guys to remind you about 10-year-old viral videos. Guess what has turned, it's 30. Street Fighter 2 is 30 years old. Actually, no. The Street Fighter franchise is 30 years old. Not Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter. I think the first one came out in 1987. That was probably why it's 30 years old. The first Street Fighter, which was terrible. I mean, I guess at the time, I don't remember seeing it in the arcades. It just wasn't that great of a game, I guess, but it kind of paved the way for fighters. Street Fighter 2 is what changed the game. Get it? Pun intended. Street Fighter 2 is what literally changed the game for fighting games. And another side note about Street Fighter 2 is that the arcades, if you remember, those of us who are older geeks, and I don't know what the exact definition or age bracket of older is, but arcades were in a slump in the late 80s. After the mid 80s, the arcade industry just took a nosedive. It had been around for about a decade. The arcades, I mean, there was a popular place to hang out. And I still remember, even into the 90s, even into the mid to late 90s, arcades were still very popular to hang out at. And we still went to arcades. It was really, once the home consoles got so good, the graphics got so good, that the arcades used to set the benchmark. Those were the best graphics and best games you could possibly play were at the arcade. But once the consoles got so good, arguably Super Nintendo really started it. Once they got so good, people were like, why do we go to the arcade and spend $1 every time we want to play a game? Super Nintendo is already as good as the arcade. So Street Fighter 2, single-handedly, when it came out in 1991, took the arcade industry out of its slump and brought the arcade industry back single-handedly. But then once Street Fighter 2 got ported to the Super Nintendo in 1992, I think it came out for the Super Nintendo, Street Fighter 2 for Super Nintendo single-handedly destroyed the arcade again. Destroy the arcade industry, because the best game that revived the arcade industry was now available at home. So the same game both revitalized the arcade industry and then destroyed it again a year later. So if you were thinking about investing in arcades or opening up an arcade in 1991 because holy crap, Street Fighter 2 is making arcades popular again, you probably lost some money. Hope you didn't invest in an arcade in 1991. That's not true. There are some people who probably had arcades who probably did very well up until the late 90s. There were still arcade games that came out. Why am I clearing my throat so much? That came out that were a good draw to the arcade. And it was usually Street Fighter games and Mortal Kombat. So Street Fighter 2, when it came to the Super Nintendo in 1992 or 91, I'm blanking out on the exact year it came out to Super Nintendo, it was just as good as the arcade, which was amazing. That was like the first time an arcade game had come to a home console, and it was just arcade perfect. And in many cases, it had worked out some of the bugs that the arcade version had, some glitches. But we can get off on a whole rabbit trail about how in Street Fighter 2, glitches were both good and bad things. If you knew a glitch with your character, you could exploit that glitch to give you an upper hand in a fight with your friend. When you're playing a friend in Street Fighter 2, give you the edge. But at the same time, that's also one of the bad things. It gave you an edge. And fighting games are supposed to be balanced. You can choose different characters, but they're supposed to be fairly equally balanced. To put in simplest terms, you could have a character that is slow but very powerful versus a character that is very fast but not as powerful. So that would be a good balance, speed for power. Anyways, yeah, so once Street Fighter 2 came to the Super Nintendo, it was arcade perfect, if not a little bit better than the arcade. And that's when people started thinking, I don't need to go to arcade to get the best games again. You know, in that vein of arcade games coming to home consoles and not being as good, I'm going to say a game right now that came out for the NES the Nintendo Entertainment System that came out. The system came out in 1985, but a game that was ported from the arcade to the original NES that, of course, didn't look as good as at the arcade, but I and my friends had more fun with on the NES because we could play it anytime we wanted, and have my most fond memories with this game on the NES as opposed to in the arcade. That game was Ninja Turtles. Do you remember Ninja Turtles in the arcade? Now, there was a Ninja Turtles game that came out for the Nintendo before the arcade game. That was still good. It was really hard, but it was different. The Ninja Turtles arcade game was a beat 'em up, kind of like Double Dragon or Final Fight, but it was the Ninja Turtles. It was a beat 'em up game. And so when it came out to the Nintendo, to us, to kids, and I guess those a little older who were into video games at that time, it still looked pretty good. It wasn't as colorful and it wasn't as sharp or whatever as the arcade. Didn't have as much going on the screen because it obviously had to be scaled back from the arcade 16-bit to the NES 8-bit. But Ninja Turtles, the arcade game on the NES, was awesome, even though it was technically worse than the arcade. The fact that it was on the NES made it awesome to us. We spent so many hours upon hours playing Ninja Turtles arcade game on the NES because it was simply available. So many sleepovers, so many sleepless nights playing Ninja Turtles arcade edition. So that's what I wanted to talk about on this segment, which is pretty much over now, was that Street Fighter 2, or Street Fighter, the Street Fighter franchise is 30. I remember 10 years ago when Street Fighter released the 20th anniversary edition onto the PS2, which is still like, I still have that PS2 disc of the Street Fighter turns 20. No. Was it on PS2? Yeah. It was on PS2 because here's what was great about it. It included almost all of the Street Fighters. Not Street Fighter EX. We don't talk about Street Fighter EX. But it had all the Street Fighter 2 versions, as well as Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. I believe it had Alpha. Did it have Alpha in there? Maybe not. It had all the Street Fighter 2 versions and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. It was the Street Fighter Anniversary Edition, 20-year Anniversary Edition, and it was awesome. I had broken up with my girlfriend recently back then, and that's when I got back into Street Fighter. For those of you who don't know, if I have not mentioned, I used to play Street Fighter 2 competitively. Street Fighter 3 and Street Fighter 4. In fact, when Street Fighter 4 was announced, I think in 2008, it had been about 10 years since they had released any Street Fighter. It had been 10 years since Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. So when they announced Street Fighter 4, this is how you know I'm a turbo geek. A turbo geek. When they announced Street Fighter 4, I wept. I didn't like bawl crying, but like when the news story came on the internet and I was reading it, I had a little tear because I love Street Fighter so much. And again, remember, I had just gotten back into Street Fighter hardcore when I was single and living by myself up in the woodlands, and all I would do is go to work there at the Cheesecake Factory, and I'd come home and be all sad and mopey with a 6-pack of beer and Street Fighter 20th Anniversary Edition on my on the PS2, and I'd play. I wouldn't get drunk. You can't get drunk off 6 beers, but I mean, I just recall that being kind of one of the sadder times in my life, I guess. But I got into Street Fighter, and it kind of pulled me out of that depression a little bit. I was depressed at that point. It probably pulled me out of depression a little bit because I started going around town playing competitively with other people. And this is back before, I mean, really when high-speed internet was sort of not really in its infancy, but not a huge thing. We didn't have all the social network stuff that we had now. So what we did is on Craigslist, we created these groups to do these meetups, these Street Fighter meetups, where we would meet up at someone's place or whatever, and we would have Street Fighter tournaments. And I met a lot of good friends that way. Had some good times back then playing Street Fighter 2. So Street Fighter is very close to my heart. I've always loved Street Fighter, and it started with Street Fighter 2 in 1991. I remember putting my quarters on the arcade machine to signify I've got next fight, to signify I play winner, and playing as much Street Fighter 2 as you could with $5 worth of quarters. And I got pretty good at Street Fighter. I could put a quarter in there or 50 cents, however much it cost, and I could beat the computer. I could get all the way to M. Bison, at least. You know, the final character, who, side note, in Europe and in Japan, M. Bison was called Vega. They basically, in a nutshell, the last 4 bosses of Street Fighter 2, they jumbled the names all up, depending on the region. So there was a boxer in Street Fighter 2 named Balrog. I mean, Balrog is still a character across all the Street Fighters. But in the Japanese version, the boxer, who is a black man who is modeled to look almost exactly like Mike Tyson, in Japan, they named that character M. Bison to kind of nod that as Mike Tyson. But when it came to the United States, Capcom didn't want to copyright or didn't want to get sued by Mike Tyson's representation, so they made that the black boxer guy, they changed his name to Balrog. And they changed the final character, what is he? Why am I blanking out? Why am I blanking out on his nationality? Anyways, the final character in Street Fighter 2 is an Asian guy, but they made him named M. Bison. It doesn't make any sense, I know. And for those of you not familiar with Street Fighter 2, it's really not worth knowing. But now it's in there, so if you're ever on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Who Wants to Millionaire, millionaire verb, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and that ever comes up, what were the original names in Japan of the final 4 bosses in Street Fighter 2? Well, now you know. Now you kind of know a little bit. Or if you want to phone a friend, phone me. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. I am Johnny Hamburger, your mental curator. We're going to get into some more geeky stuff, maybe of more mass appeal after this. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio Instagram, Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube, and geektherapyradio.com. Go check all that stuff out. Go favorite it, go follow it, go subscribe to it. We'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You still got me, Johnny Hamburger, your mental curator for this evening, and hopefully many evenings as you've been listening to the show and falling in love with it and falling in love with me. Watch out, I'm taken, ladies, and some gentlemen, and some others. I don't know. That was a terrible way to start this segment. I'm Johnny Hamburger. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I've got some interesting tidbits, or a tidbit, actually, about Hurricane Harvey, or Tropical Storm Harvey by the time it hit Houston. That storm dropped so much water on us, just a preposterous amount of water. What was the last total? Was it $9 trillion? Or dollars? No, yeah, I dropped $9 trillion on us. We're rich. 9 trillion gallons of water. That's ridiculous. That is so much water. And guess what that also means? That is so much weight. How much does 9 trillion gallons of water weigh? The answer is a lot. Enough, in fact, to have bent the crust of the earth underneath Houston by 2 centimeters. In other words, Houston, under the weight of all the water we got from one storm system, Houston sank 2 centimeters into the earth. The crust of the earth compressed 2 centimeters, a measurable amount under the weight of all the water we got in Harvey. That is crazy. Now, the Earth's crust will bounce back. It's kind of like when you put your head down on memory foam or put your hand on memory foam. You depress memory foam. Yeah, it depresses, but when you take your hand away, take the weight off of it, it gradually comes back up, reforms back to its original form. That's what Houston's going to do if it hasn't already done so. But yeah, that's a lot of water. Now, researchers say the Earth bending or the Earth compressing is normal. Like during wet season versus dry season in areas. During the wet season, the crust does go down a little bit under the weight of the water during the wet season, but it comes back up. But that's over an entire season. That's over an entire 4 or 6 months or whatever, monsoon season, basically, in different parts of the world. We depressed into the earth 2 centimeters over 4 days. One storm system. Hurricane Harvey, aka Tropical Storm Harvey. Yeah, that is just nuts. And guess how much energy it's going to take to evaporate 9 trillion gallons of water? 21,470,000 gigawatt hours. That's the minimal amount of energy it's going to take. It takes to evaporate all the water out of Houston from one storm. And that is basically 5 times the total energy output, the total electricity output of the United States per year. 5 times. It takes 5 times the electricity output that our country outputs a year to evaporate the water, for the ecosystem to evaporate the water, for the sun to evaporate the water. So those are just some numbers after Hurricane Harvey's effects on Houston. That is nuts. Side note, for those of you watching the Geek Therapy Radio, it's not the. For those of you watching Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube and wondering, hey, that's a different camera, but it looks pretty decent still. I finally got my Samsung Galaxy Note 4. Not 8, 4. And this is the front camera of the Samsung Galaxy Note 4. If you remember, my Note 3 fell in the pool, and then I tried to dry it off. And one of the ways I tried to dry it was I put it in the oven on warm, which is normal to do for about 10 minutes. But apparently, the oven on warm on this oven that I used was 300 degrees, and that's way too much. You're supposed to set it to like 150 or lower if it'll go lower, and just leave it in there 10, 20 minutes. That's okay. But my temperature was way higher than that, obviously. So when I came back after 10 minutes, my phone was, what is that? What is that painting of the melted clocks? I'm blanking out on it, blanking out on the painter, on the artist, but that's basically what my phone looked like. Melted over the bars of the little toaster oven here at work. Now, for any coworkers listening, it didn't melt enough to drip or do anything like that. It just basically, the edges of the phone were kind of sagging around. There's no plastic or hazardous chemicals in the in our little toaster oven at work. I checked. I made sure. It's nothing. It's fine. This is a few weeks ago anyway, so sorry. Sorry about the plastic in your food. There's no plastic. For the love of God, there's no plastic in your food. There hasn't been. There won't. There will never, ever be plastic in your food. That was my fault. So anyways, yeah, Galaxy Note 4. This is the front camera. I'm using an app that I suggest anybody who takes a lot of photos with their phones check out, and that is called Open Camera. Just type into the Google Play Store Open Camera. I don't know if it's available on iOS. I don't know. But for Android, definitely Open Camera. It's completely free. There's no ads. It's just an open source camera app, and it allows you to go in there and fiddle with all sorts of adjustments for your camera. Like, for instance, the video settings that I'm using for this video to record this Geek Therapy on this Note 4 is I have exposure lock turned on. So as the screen gets brighter or darker, like as the light source changes, the overall exposure doesn't change, which is super annoying if you're making videos. I have the ISO locked to 100, and I don't think you can do anything about aperture. There's not an iris on a cell phone camera, and at least not on a Galaxy's on a Galaxy Note 4's front camera. Probably not on the back either. Probably not a lot of smartphone cameras have an iris on it. And if you're watching YouTube, you can see I'm doing the iris with my hand. Either that or milking a cow. On to more nerd topics, more geek topics, more tech topics. How many of you know or remember or have memorized this is car news, what the Jaguar E-Type looks like? The answer is it's one of the most beautiful cars ever made. Just the shape of it, just as a thing to look at, as a car to look at, the Jaguar E-Type is arguably one of the best, if not the best looking car ever made. That's not even just my opinion. I don't even like Jaguars, but the E-Type is freaking gorgeous. And if I was loaded, I would buy an E-Type one day. Why am I talking about the Jaguar E-Type? Well, Jaguar has restored it, one of them, and given it an electric powertrain. They've converted it to an electric car, which is really neat. And it's kind of the way I feel about it is kind of a double-edged sword, if that's the right terminology to use, because on the one hand, it's really the idea of bringing old cars into the modern era is really cool. It's called a resto-mod. You restore the car, but you modify it. It's a modern resto mod. So what a common resto mod people do would be to take a ubiquitously available old Ford Mustang and take out the whatever was in it, the 429 engine. I don't know what was in an old Mustang, or take out the old garbage V6s that came on those old Mustangs and put in a modern Ford V8. And then put modern electronics inside of it, put modern like GPS and all that kind of stuff on the inside, seat warmers, all that kind of stuff. But on the outside, it looks like an old classic car. On the inside, it's got a modern engine putting out modern horsepower with modern fuel efficiency and modern EPA regulations. And the inside also has all sorts of modern electronics to kind of bring it up to date. But the exterior still looks like the classic car because it still is the bones of the classic car. And the reason why I have mixed feelings about this is, if you're a purist, you do not want to molest an old classic car. And I would think, on the whole, in large, most of the time you would think for an E-Type, especially for a Jaguar E-Type, what is not so widely available as an old 72 Mustang. You wouldn't want to mess with an E-Type too much. So while I think it's really cool that they resto-modded it and made it an electric car, the purist inside of me is like, it cries a little bit. My heart breaks a little bit that they took a classic E-Type and instead of restoring it to its glory, they put an electric motor in it. The geek in me says that's really cool, and I do think it's really cool. The classic car lover in me kind of winces a little bit, and I hope that doesn't really catch on. Not that it would catch on in large part. I love old Beetles, old Bugs. I've had a 69 and a 74. Do whatever the heck you want with an old Beetle. People have been doing whatever they want to an old Beetle, making Baja Bugs. That's the most popular modification. Making them off-road vehicles, souping up the engine a little bit. Do whatever you want to an old Bug, because there are millions upon millions of old Beetles. The last old bug stopped being produced in 2004 in Mexico. They even gave the Pope one of the last ones to ever roll off the assembly line at Volkswagen in Mexico. So those old Beetles were made from the 30s, 1930s to 2004. That's how long they made that body style. That's how long they made that bug. And I do want a bug. I want like a 1990, like a mid-90s Volkswagen bug, the old style Volkswagen bug, which sounds weird to say if you're not familiar with the fact that Volkswagen produced the old Beetle up until recently. Well, I say recently, it's 12 years, 13 years ago. Anyways, why I'm saying this, why I'm saying I would want a mid-late 90s old style Volkswagen Beetle from Mexico is that they had fuel injection. The engine is just the same. It's the same 1600 engine that had the carburetor on there for decades. But they added, I believe, mechanical fuel injection to it. And if you've ever had an old Beetle or an old car and have had to prime it every time you want to drive it or flooded the engine many times, fuel injection on a classic car is a modern convenience I wouldn't mind having on another old Beetle. So that's what's cool. And they have ECUs in them. They have sensors all over that old 1600. It's still air cooled. It's not water cooled. It's still air cooled, and you can get air conditioning with it also. And the inside of it looks weird because it's an old Beetle, but on the inside, it's like Volkswagen themselves resto-modded it a little bit. They basically have parts from like the same era Jettas. Like a 1995 Jetta and a 1995 old Beetle have like the same buttons, the same kind of dashboard components, the same kind of seats. It's really interesting. It's really neat. And I think it would be cool to putt around in a fuel injected old Beetle with kind of modern touches like modern radio and stuff. Air conditioning, which air conditioning in an old bug probably zaps like, well, probably like 5 horsepower or something like that. But in an engine that has like 40 horsepower, 5 horsepower is a lot to take off the top of an engine. Anyways, that's this segment of Geek Therapy Radio. I like this segment. We talked about some stuff. Harvey was a big, fat, heavy, bloated, morbidly obese mother that sat on Houston so hard that it depressed the Earth's crust 2 centimeters. That's crazy. More Geek Therapy Radio to come. I'm Johnny Hamburger. Geek Therapy Radio Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio Instagram, geektherapyradio.com, and Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. Go subscribe to see my beautiful, stupid face every week in any products that I have to show you. Like, look at my watch. Here's my old Pebble, and my timer's done. Anyways, more Geek Therapy Radio to come. Stick around. It's going to be fun.
I got you stuck off the realness. We be the infamous. We be the infamous.
Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am Johnny Hamburger, your mental curator for this evening. This is the last segment of GTR for this week, so make sure you're going and hitting up that social media and interacting with me on Facebook. That's really the easiest way. There's also a way to contact me on my website, geektherapyradio.com, which a few of you have been doing, and I appreciate. That's probably the most direct way to get my attention, is to go to geektherapyradio.com and go to the contact section. I'll see the stuff, and I will talk to you, and we'll get into it. I had a listener email me a few weeks ago saying that his son just got a newfangled camera, and they were going to make a horror movie about Bigfoot, and they wanted Geek Therapy Radio T-shirts to wear for one of the characters to wear in their movie, which I thought was really cool, and it reminded me I need to get on making Geek Therapy Radio T-shirts and mugs and bumper stickers and other things to promote this show. It's a very new show. It's a very recent show. I started in March or April, so just this spring, just before the summer. And so far, it's going so good. I've got a new sponsor coming on board, so stick around probably next week, and I'll start telling you about that sponsor, because he has something really cool that I think all of you will really want, and I can't wait to get one, because it's just something to geek out about. I had one before in the past, and This guy sells them now, and I'll give a hint, ride one around, and I'm super duper stoked that I'm going to be able to take this sponsor on, because it's a match made in geek heaven. This is going to be a short segment. I've already chewed up a little bit of time, so I'll just get right into it. The Boston Red Sox, my favorite baseball team, because of my dad mostly. The Boston Red Sox have been accused of using Apple Watches to steal signs from the catcher, from the opposing team catcher. So basically what that means is you have a Red Sox, a runner on second base who can have a clear line of sight to the signs, that the catcher is sending to the pitcher, what kind of ball to throw, location, kind of whatever's going on, whatever signs the catcher is giving to the pitcher. And you can best see those signs because the catcher usually hides it right in the bed of his crotch, so that runners on second can't see him, runners on third can't see him, runners on first can't see him. But if you're on second base, you got a clear shot to see the signals. You can better read the signals of what the catcher is sending to the pitcher. So players have been using Apple Watches to communicate with the dugout to tell them, hey, what pitch is coming up. So I guess they can tap their watch, or I don't know what app they're using or how they're exactly doing it, but it's not far-fetched to know that they are doing it. And it's probably not just the Red Sox. They're just the ones that are getting caught. It's just in that vein, cheating in baseball, it's not even, well, it is cheating, but baseball is so loose like that. And teams have been trying to get the edge and try to peek at and figure out the hand signals of the other team for years. Since baseball was created, baseball players and baseball teams have been trying to learn the other team's signals and have done so with success. So the fact that now we're using modern technology to read the signs of the other team is not far-fetched to me. It's not even crazy to me. It's just the natural evolution of the game. And if you don't think they're doing similar things in other sports, you are sadly mistaken. So, yes, the Red Sox are getting caught red-handed using Apple Watches to steal signs from the other team's pitcher and catcher. But is anyone shocked? Like, you can't, and it's not just me being a Red Sox fanboy, like, you can and you can't blame the Red Sox for doing what they did, because every team does that. Every team tries to steal the signs from the other team. Since baseball was created in the late 1800s, and since every sport has been created, you're trying to steal signals from the other team to figure out what the other team's doing. So you can blame the Red Sox for doing what they're doing, but you can't at the same time. Because if you think they're the only ones using technology to steal signs from the other team, you are mistaken. Especially those bum Yankees. Anyways, that's all we got for Geek Therapy Radio this week. I've been Johnny Hamburger. I still am Johnny Hamburger, and I will still continue to be Johnny Hamburger after this radio show is done. So, again, I can't stress enough. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook. It's so simple just to go like the page. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook. Just hit the like, and then you'll be abreast of each new podcast. And speaking of podcasts, you can get the podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and start typing in Geek Ther, and it will pop up. Geek Therapy Radio will pop up. And so subscribe to the podcast, and you'll get all the podcasts immediately as I upload them. And a little behind the scenes look, I upload the podcasts usually before the show airs Sundays at 12:06 here on KPRC. I upload the podcast usually Friday nights, so you usually get the show a little bit early. The same goes with YouTube. I upload the YouTube on Friday or Saturday nights. So Geek Therapy Radio podcast on iTunes, and it's also on Spreaker and the iHeartRadio app. But honestly, the iHeartRadio app is the easiest way to do it. Unless you have an iOS device or you have iTunes, just subscribe there to Geek Therapy Radio on iTunes and get all the podcasts. So go to Geek Therapy Radio also on YouTube to get the videos, because it's just the same show. I just have a camera on me so you can see what I'm doing. yeah, Geek Therapy Radio Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio Instagram, and geektherapyradio.com. Go check out the website. It's very basic, but it keeps you current on what's going on with Geek Therapy Radio. Love each other, especially now. And you know what? I don't even have to say so much of this because Houston has been showing that love to each other this week. I'm so proud of my city and how it's responded to this disaster. We started helping each other while this rain was still falling. In the heat of the storm, we were still helping each other. So I'm very proud of my city, and I love you geeks for being so open to your neighbor. Thank you. Continue to do so, and I'll love you forever for it. Thank you so much. I'm Johnny Hamburger. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio, and we'll see you next week.